All characters and events in this story are the fruit of my imagination. If something seems like reality, it's just the stars aligning that way. Please don't judge too harshly. We are 100% against cheating, alcohol, anything prohibited, and any violation of the law. Write in the comments what city you are from and where you listen to this audio version. Share the vibe. Don't forget to like, tell your life story, and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with new exciting stories. Jack Reynolds parked his black Jeep Grand Cherokee in front of a two-story mansion in Beverly Hills. It was 7 in the morning, and the sun was already beginning to bake the asphalt. He had just returned from a night shift guarding Edward Crowe, the media mogul whose news empire dominated the country. Jack had been working for Crowe for 3 years, and his life was scheduled down to the minute. Training, perimeter checks, escorting his boss to meetings. But today, his mind was not on work. He walked into the house, dropping his keys on the wooden table in the entryway. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the air conditioner. Caitlin, his wife, usually slept until 9, especially after her nights out with the girls. Jack walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and froze. His beer was gone. Again. "What the hell?" he muttered, looking at the empty shelf where a 6-pack of Hazy Hero IPA from a local brewery should have been. He'd bought it 3 days ago, and he was certain there were 4 bottles left. Now they are gone. Jack closed the refrigerator and rubbed his temples. It was the 3rd time this month. He wasn't paranoid, but his powers of observation, honed by years in the Marines and as a bodyguard, told him something was wrong. Caitlin didn't drink beer. She called it plebeian swill and preferred her expensive Chardonnay. Who then? He walked into the living room, took off his jacket, and draped it over the back of a chair. His gun, a Glock 19, was still holstered under his arm. Jack sat down on the couch, pulled out his phone, and opened the Notes app. He began jotting down the dates the beer had gone missing. May 3rd, May 12th, and now May 20th. All 3 times coincided with his night shifts, when he'd stayed in Crowe's office or accompanied him to late meetings. Coincidence, he said to himself, but his voice sounded skeptical. Jack stood up and went back into the kitchen. He opened the trash can under the sink to check for any empty bottles. Nothing. No glass, no aluminum cans. Someone hadn't just been drinking his beer, they'd been cleaning up after themselves. That made him even more wary. At that moment, footsteps were heard from above. Caitlin was coming down the stairs. Jack closed the trash can and leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing his arms. She walked into the kitchen wearing a silk robe, her hair pulled back into a messy bun. Her makeup was slightly smudged, as if she hadn't bothered to wash it off before bed. "Good morning," Caitlin said without looking at him. She walked over to the coffee maker and began fiddling with the capsules. "Morning," Jack replied, watching her. "Did you sleep well?" "Fine," she shrugged. "And you? Up all night with Crowe again?" "Yeah," Jack said. "Just a normal shift." Caitlin nodded without turning around. She poured coffee into a mug. Jack looked at her, trying to catch anything unusual. Her movements were the same as always, but something in her tone seemed distant. "Did you come home late yesterday?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Caitlin set her mug on the counter and looked at him. Her blue eyes were calm, but Jack noticed that she was taking a little longer than usual to choose her words. "Not really," she said. "I was at Sarah's. We drank wine and chatted. You know how it is." "Yeah," Jack nodded. "Wine, then." "Well, yeah," she smiled, but it was a strained smile. "Kim Crawford." "Nothing special." Jack nodded, but something clicked in his head. He remembered that there was a bottle of her Chardonnay in the fridge, and it was half empty, even though Caitlin said she hadn't opened a new one. He decided not to press, but made a mental note. "I'm going to take a shower," he said, moving away from the counter. "Then I'll go to the gym." "Okay," Caitlin replied, already buried in her phone. "See you tonight?" "If Crowe doesn't hold up," Jack said and headed upstairs. In the bathroom, he turned on the water but didn't undress. Instead, he pulled out his phone and texted his friend Mike. a former Marine colleague who now worked in private security. Mike, I need your help. Can you check if my wife has anything weird going on? Phone, social media, whatever. Nothing specific, just a feeling. Mike replied a minute later. No problem, bro. Give me a couple days. Something wrong. I don't know yet, Jack wrote, but the beer keeps disappearing from the fridge. Ha, seriously? Mike replied. This is not something to mess around with, Jack wrote. Just check, okay? Consider it done. Jack put the phone away and looked at himself in the mirror. His face, with a light stubble and a scar above his left eyebrow, looked tired. He was in great shape for a 35-year-old 5 feet 90, broad shoulders, toned arms, but the last few months of his marriage to Caitlin had been draining him of energy. They had married 5 years ago, when she was an event planner and seemed perfect. Beautiful, smart, always had the right words. But now their conversations had become trivial, and her nights out with the girls were becoming more frequent. He took a shower, changed into his workout clothes, and went downstairs. Caitlin was no longer in the kitchen. Her mug was sitting in the sink, half empty. Jack opened the fridge again, just to make sure. No beer. He did notice, however, that the bottle of Chardonnay was now empty. He distinctly remembered it being half full yesterday. Interesting, he said out loud. Jack took his keys and drove to the gym where he trained 5 times a week. It wasn't the fancy one Caitlin went to, but an old-fashioned boxing club in Santa Monica, with the smell of sweat and heavy bags. There he could blow off steam and think. In the gym he met Tony, his trainer, a big guy with tattoos on his neck. Hey, Jack, why are you so gloomy? Tony asked as Jack unwrapped his hand bandages. Oh, nothing, Jack replied, putting on his gloves. The house is a mess. Wife? Tony grinned. What, spending your money on clothes again? If only, said Jack. She seems to be wasting my beer. Tony burst out laughing. Beer? Seriously? I thought your madam only drank $300 wine. That's what I thought, Jack said, starting to work on the bag. But someone's been drinking my IPA while I'm gone. Maybe you have a ghost? Tony joked. Maybe, Jack said, but his voice was serious. Or someone else. Tony whistled. Listen, bro, you're a bodyguard. You have a nose for trouble. If something's wrong, you'll dig it up. Already digging, Jack said, hitting the punching bag. Already digging. After practice, Jack drove to Crow's office to discuss the next week's schedule. Edward Crow sat behind a massive desk in his office on the top floor of a skyscraper in downtown Los Angeles. He was 55 but looked 40, trim, with graying hair and a well-groomed beard. He wore a $10,000 suit and sipped coffee from a mug bearing his company logo. Jack, Crow said, still glued to his laptop. We're flying to New York next week. 5 days of investor meetings. You in? Always in business, boss, Jack replied, standing by the door. He never sat down unless Crow asked. Okay, Crow said, looking at him. Are you okay? You look like you haven't slept. I was sleeping, Jack said. Just. Minor problems at home. Crow raised an eyebrow. Caitlin. Jack shrugged. Maybe. Nothing serious. I'll figure it out. Figure it out, Crow said. I need you with a clear head. If anything happens, tell me. I'll give you the day off. It won't be necessary, said Jack. I can handle it. I believe you, said Crow and returned to his laptop. I'm free until tomorrow. Jack nodded and left the office. In the elevator, he opened the notes on his phone again. He added a new line. Check when Caitlin leaves the house. Keep an eye on her car. When Jack got home at 6 p.m., he found Caitlin in the living room. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through something on her tablet. She was wearing tight workout clothes, as if she was going to the gym. Hey, Jack said, setting his bag down by the door. Going to yoga? Yes, Caitlin answered without looking up. Class is in half an hour. With Sarah? He asked, remembering her friend. No, alone, she said. Sarah is busy. I see, said Jack. And you were hanging out with her yesterday, right? Caitlin looked at him, her face tightening for a second. Yeah, with her. What kind of interrogation? Not interrogating, Jack said, raising his hands. Just wondering how my wife spends her time. I'm having a fine time, she said, standing up. I need to get ready. Sure, Jack said. See you later. Caitlin went upstairs and Jack walked into the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator and checked the shelves. The new bottle of Chardonnay was still there, but it had been opened. He shook his head. Something was wrong, and he was going to find out. Later, after Caitlin left, Jack sat at the kitchen table with his laptop. He opened the website of the brewery where he bought his IPA and ordered a new case. But this time, he decided to do something else. He went to the website of an electronics store and ordered a hidden camera with Wi-Fi that could stream video to his phone. Delivery would be tomorrow. Let's see who here likes to take other people's things without asking, he said, closing the laptop. Jack stood up, grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, and headed upstairs. He knew this was just the beginning. If Caitlin was hiding something, he would find proof. And if not, he would at least know where his beer was going. But his gut told him the truth would be more complicated, and that it wasn't just beer that was being taken without asking. Jack Reynolds stepped out of his SUV in front of the post office in downtown Beverly Hills. It was 10 in the morning, and the street was already filling with cars and pedestrians. He had just finished his morning workout at a boxing club and was stopping by to pick up a package he had ordered 2 days earlier. Inside the box was a hidden Wi-Fi camera, a small gadget that would answer the question. The post office was crowded. Jack stood in line, phone in hand. A message from Mike, his friend, appeared on the screen, promising to check Caitlin's social media activity. Nothing weird so far, Mike wrote. She posts yoga pics and dinners with her friends. But I'm digging deeper. Let me know if you need anything specific. Thanks, Jack replied. Just keep your eyes open. He put the phone away and walked up to the counter. The employee, a woman in her 40s with a tired look, handed him a small cardboard box. Jack Reynolds, she asked, checking the name on the form. Yes, it's me, Jack said, signing on the tablet. Have a nice day, she said, already moving on to the next client. Jack returned to the car, threw the box on the passenger seat, and drove home. The Beverly Hills mansion greeted him with silence. Caitlin had gone to another yoga class, or so she'd said when she left that morning. Jack walked into the living room, opened the box, and pulled out a camera. It was the size of a lighter, with the lens hidden in a case that looked like a phone charger. It came with instructions and a smartphone app. Jack plugged the camera into an outlet on the shelf next to the TV, camouflaging it among the cables and decorative candles Caitlin had placed throughout the house. Not bad, he said, checking the angle of view through the app. The camera captured the entire living room, the sofa, the coffee table, the entrance to the kitchen, and the stairs up. If someone came in, they would see it. Jack tested the recording, walked around the room, then watched the video. The quality was crisp, the audio clear. He set up notifications on his phone so the app would alert him to movement in the living room when he wasn't home. Once he was sure everything was working, he put the box in the trash can in the garage so Caitlin wouldn't suspect anything. Now we wait, he said, closing the tank. Back at the house, Jack walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. His new six-pack of Hazy Hero IPA was there, untouched. He'd marked them with a little dot on the top of each bottle with a Sharpie. If anyone took the beer, he'd notice. At that moment, the front door slammed. Caitlin was back. Jack closed the refrigerator and turned to the door. She walked into the living room, holding a gym bag and a bottle of water. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a high ponytail, and she had a smile on her face that Jack thought was a little too pleased. Hi, Caitlin said, throwing her bag on the couch. Are you home? Yeah, Jack said, coming out of the kitchen. Just dropped by. How's yoga? Great, she said, opening a bottle of water. The new trainer is awesome. So intense. A new coach? Jack asked, trying to sound indifferent. What about the old one? Couldn't take it. Oh, she quit, Caitlin said, waving her hand. This guy's better. Knows how to keep a group on their toes. Boy, Jack leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. Caitlin looked at him, her smile fading slightly. Yeah, man. Brad, I think. What kind of questions are you asking? Jack, does it bother you? No questions, he said with a shrug. I'm studying, she said, rolling her eyes. You could do it too. You're always at work. Work pays for this house, Jack said. And your yoga too, by the way. Caitlin snorted and walked to the stairs. I'm going to shower. Then I'm going to Sarah's. She's asking me to lunch. Sarah again? Jack asked. You hang out with her every day. Not everyone, Caitlin snapped, already climbing the steps. Don't start, Jack. I won't start, he said, but she had already disappeared upstairs. In the evening, Jack left for a shift at Edward Crow's. The boss was preparing to meet with partners in the office, and Jack had to check the security of the premises. In a skyscraper in downtown Los Angeles, he walked around the conference room, checked the windows, doors, and the video surveillance system. Everything clear? Crow asked as he entered the room. He was wearing a dark blue suit and holding a tablet. As always, said Jack, no one will come in while I'm here. Okay, Crow said, sitting down at the table. Sit down, Jack. Let's talk. Jack sat down opposite him. Crow rarely called him just to chat, so this was alarming. Are you okay? Crow asked, looking him in the eye. He's been kind of tense the last few days. It's okay, boss, Jack said. Just some small business around the house. Small things can become big things, Crow said. Caitlin? Jack paused. Maybe. Nothing serious yet. Bye, Crow repeated, leaning back in his chair. Listen, I've been through this. If something's wrong, sort it out right away. Don't drag it out. I'm already figuring it out, Jack said. Thanks for the advice. You're welcome, Crow said. And don't forget about New York. We're flying out in a week. 5 days, lots of meetings. Be prepared. Always ready, Jack said. After the meeting, Jack stayed in the office until midnight, checking Crow's schedule. His phone vibrated several times. The camera app alerted him to movement in the living room. He opened the video, but nothing suspicious. Caitlin was walking around the room, talking on the phone, then going upstairs. Jack saved the recording, deciding to watch it later. When he got home at 2 a.m., the house was dark. Caitlin was asleep or pretending to be. Jack went into the downstairs office, plugged his phone into his laptop, and started scrolling through the camera footage. The first video was blank. Caitlin simply walked through the living room with her bag. The second showed more. In the recording, Caitlin was sitting on the couch, holding her phone. She was smiling, fiddling with a strand of hair. Jack turned up the volume. Yes, I know, she said, giggling. No, he's leaving next week. To New York, with the boss. 5 days. Pause. Jack strained, listening. Of course I'm free, Caitlin said, lowering her voice. Come on over, it'll be fun. Just don't be late like last time. She laughed, then added, Okay, see you later. Bye. Caitlin put the phone down and walked out of the frame. Jack rewound the tape, listened to it again. His heart was beating faster, but his face remained calm. He knew what it meant. She was planning to meet someone while he was away. A lover. The word hung in his head like a fact he could no longer ignore. Well, Caitlin, he said quietly, you're caught. Jack saved the video to his hard drive and closed his laptop. He walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. 1 bottle of beer was missing. The marker dot on the lid was missing. Someone had replaced his bottle with one without a mark. It wasn't just any beer. It was a sign. In the morning, he called Mike. Mike, Jack said when he answered, did you find anything? Just pictures so far, Mike said. But there's one thing. She's been liking posts from some trainers at her gym. Brad Taylor. A lot of likes. Too many. Brad, Jack repeated. Check him out. Everything you can find. Where he lives, who he hangs out with, everything. Got it, Mike said. Are you sure you want to dig? If there's something down there, you might not like it. I already know what I won't like, Jack said. Just give me the facts. Okay, Mike said. Give me a day or two. Jack hung up and looked at the camera in the living room. It was still running. He knew that recording alone wasn't enough. He needed evidence that would leave Caitlin with no chance to get away with it. And he was going to find it. 5 days in New York, he said, remembering Caitlin's words. Let's see who comes to have fun. Jack opened his laptop and started searching for information about Brad Taylor. The trainer's social media was full of photos, posing at the gym, smiling with clients, bragging about cocktails at trendy bars. Jack noticed a few comments from Caitlin, nothing obvious, but enough to confirm connection. He closed the laptop and stood up. It was time to act. The camera had given him his first piece of truth, but it wasn't enough. He decided to follow Caitlin. Jack Reynolds sat in his black Jeep Grand Cherokee in the parking lot across from the upscale Pulse Fitness gym in West Hollywood. It was 11 in the morning, and the sun was beating down so hard the pavement felt scorching. He had put on sunglasses and a baseball cap to blend in with the locals, though his broad shoulders and military demeanor were still noticeable. Jack had been keeping an eye on Caitlin. After he had caught her on camera making plans to meet someone while he was in New York, he had decided to do something about it. She had left for yoga again this morning, and Jack had followed her. Her white Mercedes was parked in the gym's parking lot. Jack checked his phone. The living room camera app hadn't sent any new notifications. He knew Caitlin was there, but he wanted to see who she was talking to. The name Brad Taylor that Mike had mentioned kept popping into his head. A trainer from this very gym whose social media posts Caitlin liked way too often. Jack took the binoculars out of the glove compartment and pointed them at the entrance to the hall. Through the glass doors, he saw people in expensive sportswear, with bottles of water and headphones. Caitlin came out 20 minutes later in tight leggings and a top, with a bag over her shoulder. Next to her was a guy tall, tanned, with a perfect haircut and a snow-white smile. Jack immediately recognized him from a photo on social media. Brad. So that's what you are, a bastard, Jack muttered, lowering his binoculars. They walked close, Caitlin laughing, touching his arm. Jack felt the blood rush to his face, but he remained calm. He pulled out his phone and began filming through the windshield. Caitlin and Brad headed across the street to the Green Leaf, a trendy vegan salad and smoothie place. Jack got out of the car, keeping his distance, and followed them. The cafe was crowded. Jack took a table in the corner, ordering coffee so as not to attract attention. Caitlin and Brad sat by the window, and Jack could see them through the glass. They sat close, Caitlin leaning toward him, and Brad putting his arm around the back of her chair. At one point, Caitlin hugged him, and they laughed. Jack took out his phone, snapped a few pictures, capturing the moment when their hands intertwined. The photo was clear, Caitlin hugging Brad, both smiling like a couple. That's enough, Jack told himself, putting the phone away. He finished his coffee, left a tip, and walked out. His heart was pounding, but his mind was cool. This was proof, not just a suspicion, but a fact. He returned to the car and sent the photo to Mike. Is this him? Jack wrote. Brad Taylor? Mike replied after a minute. That's definitely it. Do you want me to dig deeper? Yes, Jack wrote. Find out where he goes, who he hangs out with, everything. Understood, brother. It will be done. Jack started the engine and drove home. He knew Caitlin would be back later. She'd mentioned meeting a friend after yoga. That gave him time to think. The photo was a first step, but he wanted to know more. At home, Jack went into his office, connected his phone to his laptop, and saved the photos to a secure folder. He checked the footage from the living room camera. Nothing new, just Caitlin in the morning, packing her bag before leaving. Jack leaned back in his chair, looking at the screen. His thoughts were interrupted by a call from Edward Crow. "Jack," Crow said as soon as he answered. "Meeting with partners downtown tonight. Be in the office by 6. "Roger that, boss," Jack said. "Everything's under control." "Are you okay?" Crow asked. "Your voice sounds tense." "It's okay," Jack said. "It's just a rough day." "Don't overexert yourself," Crow said. "I need you in shape, especially in New York." "I'll be in shape," Jack said, "until this evening." He hung up and looked at his watch. It was noon. Caitlin would be back in an hour or two if her lunch with a friend didn't drag on. Jack decided to stay home and see how she would behave. At 1:30, the front door opened. Caitlin walked in, holding her phone and bag. She didn't notice Jack sitting in the living room and went straight to the kitchen. Jack heard her open the refrigerator, then pour something into a glass. He stood up and quietly walked to the kitchen door. "Hello," he said, appearing in the doorway. Caitlin winced, nearly spilling her wine. "Oh my God, Jack, you scared me. What are you doing at home?" "Finished early," he said, looking at her. "And you? How was lunch?" "Fine," she said, looking away. "With Sarah, we chatted, ate salads." "Sarah," Jack repeated, nodding. "Is she okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine," Caitlin said, setting her glass on the counter. "Why do you ask?" "Just wondering," Jack said, crossing his arms. "You hang out with her a lot." Caitlin looked at him, her face tightening. "Is this another interrogation? I can't see my friend?" "You can," Jack said. "I just noticed you were always out and about." "I'm not disappearing," she snapped. "I'm living my life, Jack. You're always at work, and I'm supposed to sit at home and be bored." "No one is asking you to be bored, by the way. You could also go to work, not for the money, but in general for development, so to speak," said Jack. "But it would be nice to know where my wife is." Caitlin rolled her eyes and picked up her phone. "I need to make a call. I'll be upstairs." "Of course," Jack said, watching her leave. He waited for her to come up the stairs and then returned to the living room. The camera on the shelf was still running. Jack sat down on the couch, pulled out his phone, and checked his notifications. Nothing new. He decided to stay home until his shift to see what Caitlin would do next. Half an hour later, he heard her voice from above. She was talking on the phone, and her tone was too animated. Jack quietly walked up the stairs, stopping at the bedroom door. The door was slightly open, and he heard every word. "Sarah, you're not going to believe it," Caitlin said, giggling. "He's so hot. I mean, this guy is a dream. We went to a cafe after practice today, and he's so cute, you know?" Jack froze, clenching his fists. He continued to listen. "No, Jack doesn't know anything," Caitlin said, lowering her voice. "He's always at his job, and next week he's leaving for New York. 5 days, Sarah. 5 days of freedom." She laughed, and Jack felt the blood pounding in his temples. He wanted to rush in and make a scene, but he held back. This was not the time. "Yeah, Brad," Caitlin continued. "He's a trainer. He's so ripped, and his smile. Oh my God, I'm melting. We've hung out a couple times, and he's like, you know?" Sarah said something, and Caitlin laughed again. "No, I'm being careful. Jack won't suspect anything. He's too busy with his crow." Jack moved away from the door, went downstairs, and sat down in the living room. He wrote to Mike, "I don't need confirmation. I already found out everything. It's confirmed. It's Brad. Find me everything you can, all his shit." Mike replied, "Got it. How are you holding up?" "I'm holding up," Jack wrote, "but this is just the beginning." Jack stood up, grabbed his keys, and drove to Crow's office. On the way, he thought about Caitlin, about Brad, about what to do next. He remembered the prenup they'd signed 5 years ago. If she cheated, she'd lose everything. The house, the money, the comfort. Jack knew that was his trump card, but he didn't want to just get a divorce. He wanted her to pay for her betrayal. At the office, Crow met him in the conference room. "Jack," Crow said, looking at him. You look like you're ready to kill someone. Just tired, Jack said, forcing a smile. Ready for the evening. I'm ready, said Crow. But if something's wrong, tell me. You're my best man, and I haven't liked your face lately. Everything is under control, Jack said. I promise. Crow nodded, and they began to discuss the details of the meeting. Jack Reynolds sat at his desk in his office in the Beverly Hills mansion. On his laptop screen was a video from the living room camera. Caitlin, his wife, making arrangements over the phone to meet her lover, while Jack was in New York with his boss. On the phone next to him was a photo of Caitlin and Brad Taylor hugging in a West Hollywood cafe. Her words, overheard the day before, echoed in his head. 5 days of freedom. Jack clenched his fists, but his face remained calm. He wasn't going to yell or make a scene. Caitlin and her trainer would pay for their betrayal, and he knew how to make it happen. Jack picked up his notebook and began writing. His thoughts were as clear as ever. Years of service in the Marines and as a bodyguard had taught him to act with cold blood. He remembered the prenuptial agreement they had signed 5 years ago. If Caitlin was proven to be unfaithful, she would lose everything. Her home, her money, her comfort. Divorce was inevitable, but Jack wanted more. He wanted her to feel the consequences, to remember it. He dialed Mark Levin, his lawyer. Mark was a former military lawyer who now worked for wealthy clients in Los Angeles. The phone rang twice before Mark answered. Jack, Mark said, his voice cheerful. What's wrong? You rarely call without reason. I need your help, Jack said, looking at the laptop. It's about Caitlin. I want a divorce. Really? Mark paused. Okay, tell me. What do you have? Proof, Jack said. Videos of her planning a date with another guy. Photos of them together. And I heard her bragging to her friend about her trainer. That's something, Mark said. Is the marriage contract still in effect? You said there was a clause about adultery. Yes, said Jack. If I prove it, she'll be left empty-handed. Okay, Mark said. Send everything. Video, photos, write about the conversation. I'll start preparing the documents. But Jack, are you sure? This is a big step. I'm sure, Jack said, his voice unwavering. She betrayed me. I won't forgive her. Got it, Mark said. Come to the office tomorrow, we'll discuss it. And keep a handle on yourself, okay? No nonsense. I'm fine, Jack said. Everything is under control. I believe you, said Mark. See you tomorrow. Jack hung up and opened his email. He attached the video from the camera, the photo from the cafe, and wrote a short description of Caitlin's conversation with Sarah. After sending the email, he sat back in his chair. The documents were the first order of business. Now he had to catch Caitlin and Brad so they couldn't get away with it. He knew what to do and began to think about how to arrange everything. Jack called Mike, his friend who was collecting information about Brad. Mike, Jack said when he answered, What's new with Taylor? Hey, Mike said, I found a little. Brad Taylor, 28, rents an apartment in West Hollywood. Trains at Pulse Fitness. I like to party, go to bars, and take pictures with clients. Seems to have a thing for flirting with rich women. I know that, Jack said. What else? Is he seeing anyone other than Caitlin? It's not clear yet, Mike said. There's one client, a brunette, about 35 years old. They talk a lot, but nothing concrete. He's also in debt. A car loan, a couple thousand in arrears. Debts, Jack repeated. Interesting. Dig further. Where he hangs out, who he hangs out with. I will, Mike said. You have something in mind, right? Yes, said Jack, but it's better for you not to know. Okay, Mike said. Just don't screw up, bro. If she finds out you're digging, it'll be funny. He won't know, said Jack. I'm careful. He hung up and looked at his notebook. Jack began to jot down notes, the dates of his trip, Caitlin's schedule, her habits. He knew she and Brad would take advantage of his departure. This was his chance. He wasn't going to just expose them. He wanted them to remember this lesson for a long time. Caitlin arrived home at 4 o'clock. Jack heard the front door slam and closed his laptop. He walked into the living room where Caitlin was taking off her sneakers and throwing her bag on the couch. "Hello," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "How are you?" "Fine," Caitlin said, not looking at him. "I was in the gym, tired." "With Brad again?" Jack asked, watching her reaction. Caitlin froze for a second, then looked at him. "Yeah, he was leading the training. So what?" "Nothing," Jack said, shrugging. "You just talk about him a lot." "Because he's a good coach," she said, rolling her eyes. "Jack, what's with the interrogation? Are you paranoid?" "Maybe," Jack said, smiling. "But I'm just wondering what my wife is doing." "I'm busy with sports," Caitlin snapped. "And you're always at your job. Maybe you should spend more time at home." "Maybe," Jack said, "but someone's got to pay for that house." Caitlin snorted and went into the kitchen. Jack heard her open the refrigerator and pour wine. He went back to the office and checked the camera in the living room. It was recorded. If Caitlin talked on the phone or invited anyone over, he would know. In the evening, Jack went to Edward Crow's office. The boss was preparing for a meeting with investors, and Jack checked the conference room. Windows, doors, cameras. Crow noticed his thoughtfulness. "Jack," Crow said, sitting at the table, "you're acting like a robot today. What's wrong?" "It's okay, boss," Jack said, checking the lock. "Just personal business." "Caitlin?" Crow asked, looking him in the eyes. "Something like that," Jack said, "but I'll figure it out." "Figure it out," Crow said. "And don't forget about New York. We're flying out in a week. 5 days, lots of meetings." "I'm ready," Jack said. "I won't let you down." "I know," said Crow. "But if something's in the way, just tell me. I need you 100%. "I'm 100, Jack said, forcing a smile. After his shift, Jack stopped at a cafe in Santa Monica to meet Mike. They sat at a table outside and ordered coffee. "So, what do you have?" Jack asked, looking at his friend. "Brad is a typical ladies' man," Mike said, opening his laptop. "Here, look. His social media, his messages. He flirts with a lot of clients, but mostly with Caitlin. Plus, he's been in your area a couple of times. The geolocation is in his posts." "In our area?" Jack asked, tensing. "Yeah," Mike said. "Twice in the last week. Once in the evening when you were on shift." "Bastard," Jack said, clutching his cup. "What else?" "His debts are mounting," Mike said. "Car, credit card. Looks like he's counting on rich chicks to get out of it." "He picked the wrong lady," Jack said. "Send me everything, and keep digging." "I will," Mike said. "But Jack, what are you planning? You look like you're preparing for war." "Not war," Jack said. "Just justice." "Okay," Mike said, raising his hands. "Just don't drag me into this." "I won't," said Jack. "It's my business." He got home around midnight. Caitlin was asleep or pretending to be. Jack went into the kitchen and opened the fridge. One bottle of beer was missing. He checked the cap, no mark on it. Brad, or someone, was here again. Jack chuckled. They thought he didn't notice. They would soon find out how wrong they were. In the morning, Jack drove to Mark's office in downtown Los Angeles. Mark met him in an office littered with folders and coffee cups. "Jack," Mark said, shaking his hand, "have a seat. I've looked at your letter. The evidence is good, but we need more." "I'm working on it," Jack said, sitting down. "What about the paperwork?" "I started preparing," Mark said, opening the folder. "The contract is ironclad. If the betrayal is proven, she loses everything. But we need an indisputable fact. Video and photos are a start, but if she hires a lawyer, there could be disputes." "There will be facts," Jack said. "I'll take care of them." "Okay," Mark said. "I'll have a draft by the end of the week. But Jack, what are you planning? You seem too calm." "Is that bad?" Jack asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's scary," Mark said with a grin. Just don't do anything illegal, okay? I won't, said Jack. It'll be clean. I believe you, Mark said. I'll call when the papers are ready. Jack left the office, feeling a plan forming in his head. He didn't tell Mark the details, but he knew it would work. Caitlin and Brad weren't expecting a catch. They thought he was a blind fool hanging around with his boss. They would soon find out they were wrong. At home, he checked the camera. Caitlin had called her friend, but she hadn't said anything suspicious. Jack knew time was on his side. He kept taking notes, monitoring her schedule, and preparing. Every step brought him closer to the moment when Caitlin would regret her choice. You wanted freedom, he said quietly, looking at the photo from the cafe. You will have it. Jack closed his laptop and went to the gym. He needed to blow off some steam to keep a clear head. He had a plan. Now all he had to do was wait for the right moment. Jack Reynolds parked his SUV in front of the downtown Los Angeles skyscraper that housed Edward Crow's office. It was 8 in the morning, and the city was already bustling with activity. Cars honking, pedestrians hurrying along the sidewalks. Jack put on his sunglasses and adjusted his jacket, hiding the holster holding his Glock 19. Today, he wasn't just here to start his shift. He needed to talk to his boss, and the conversation needed to stay between them. Yesterday, Jack sent Mark, the lawyer, evidence of Caitlin's infidelity. CCTV footage, photos of her with Brad Taylor at a cafe, a description of an overheard conversation. Mark began preparing divorce papers, confirming that the prenuptial agreement would leave Caitlin with nothing if the infidelity was proven. Jack also received new information from Mike about Brad. The guy was deeply in debt and flirting with clients, including Caitlin. All the pieces were falling into place, and Jack knew his next step was to catch them red-handed. To do this, he needed to change his plans for a business trip to New York. He walked into the skyscraper lobby, nodded to the security guard at the desk, and took the elevator to the 35th floor. Crow's office was the epitome of power. Glass walls, leather furniture, a view of the city. The secretary, Linda, a woman in her 40s with a perfectly coiffed hairdo, smiled at Jack. "Good morning, Jack," she said. "Mr. Crow is here. Is he waiting for you?" "No," Jack said, "but I need to talk to him. It's urgent." "Let me see," Linda said, checking the schedule on her tablet. "He has a call in half an hour, but he's free now. Go ahead, just don't hold me up." "Thank you," Jack said, heading toward the office. He knocked and walked in. Edward Crow was sitting at a massive desk, looking through paperwork. He was wearing a gray suit, and on the desk was a mug with the logo of his media empire. Crow looked up and nodded. "Jack," he said, "you're early today. Is something wrong?" "We need to talk," Jack said, closing the door. "This is personal." Crow put the papers down and gestured to a chair. "Sit down. What's personal?" Jack remained standing. He was used to speaking to his boss on his feet, like a soldier speaking to his commander. "It's about a business trip to New York. I'd like to ask you to postpone the flight for one day." Crow raised an eyebrow. "Move? That's new. Why?" "Personal circumstances," Jack said, looking him in the eye. "I need a day to sort things out at home, then I'm all in." Crow leaned back in his chair, studying him. "Personal circumstances, then, Caitlin?" Jack paused, then nodded. "Yeah, nothing that will interfere with work, but I need to get this sorted out." "You're not one to ask without a reason," said Crow. "I trust you, Jack. If you say you can do it, I believe you. What day should I reschedule?" "Tuesday instead of Monday," Jack said. "Nothing else changes." "Okay," Crow said, opening his laptop. "I'll tell Linda she'll rearrange the flight and the meetings. But Jack, are you sure this won't put you out of action? New York is an important trip." "I'm in," Jack said, his voice firm. "It's just one day. Thanks, boss." Crow nodded. "You're welcome. If it's something serious, just tell me. You're my best man. I don't want you to break." "I won't break," Jack said. "See you later." He left the office, feeling like part of the plan was falling into place. Crow had agreed without question, just as Jack had hoped. Edward valued him for 3 years of impeccable work. Not a single mistake, not a single failure. That trust gave Jack free rein. Now he knew he could go home on Monday, when Caitlin and Brad would think he was on a plane. Jack went down to the lobby and got into his car. He took out his phone and texted Mike. "The trip has been postponed," he wrote. "What's up with you about Brad?" Mike responded a minute later. He was hanging out at a bar in Santa Monica last night, flirting with some blonde, but not your wife. Plus, he was seen with Caitlin at Pulse Fitness this morning. Want me to follow him? "Not yet," Jack wrote. "Just keep me posted on where he's been." "Okay, you have something in mind, huh?" "I'll look into it," Jack wrote. "Thanks." He put his phone away and drove home. Caitlin was supposed to be at the gym, which gave him time to check the cameras. He'd installed a second one yesterday in the kitchen, hidden among the coffee cans on the shelf. Now he had a view of the two main rooms where Caitlin spent most of her time. At home, Jack went into the office and opened his laptop. He checked the footage from both cameras. In the kitchen, Caitlin had been drinking wine and talking on the phone the night before, but she hadn't said anything suspicious. In the living room, she was sitting with her tablet, scrolling through social media. Jack noticed that she had liked Brad's post a photo from the gym with the caption, "Ready for more." He shook his head. She hadn't even tried to be discreet. Jack opened the refrigerator. One of his beers was missing again. He checked the lid's no tags. Brad, or someone else, kept coming to his house. Jack closed the refrigerator and went back to his office. He knew that Caitlin and Brad were planning a meeting on Monday when he was supposed to fly out. Now, with the rescheduled trip, he would be able to catch them. Caitlin returned at 2 o'clock. Jack heard the door slam and went into the living room. She threw her gym bag on the couch and took off her sneakers. "Hey," he said, standing in the doorway. "How was practice?" "Killer," Caitlin said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Brad was on fire today." "Brad," Jack repeated, keeping his cool. "You hang out with him a lot." Caitlin looked at him, narrowing her eyes. "He's my coach, Jack. What are you starting?" "Nothing," Jack said with a shrug. "I just noticed you were in the gym a lot." "Because I like it," she snapped. "Better than being stuck at home." "I see," said Jack. "I thought you were bored at home." Caitlin rolled her eyes. "I don't have time to be bored. I'm going to shower, then go to Sarah's." "Sarah again?" Jack asked. "You're with her every day." "Not everyone," she said, heading for the stairs. "Enough interrogation, Jack." "No interrogation," he said, watching her leave. He went back to the office and checked his phone. The camera in the kitchen sent a notification. Caitlin was pouring wine. Jack opened the video. She was standing at the counter, holding the phone. "Sarah, I'm not kidding," Caitlin said, laughing. "He's so sweet. And you know, Jack's leaving on Monday. It'll be fun." Jack gritted his teeth. She hadn't known he'd be home. He'd saved the video and added it to his evidence folder. Every move she made confirmed his suspicions. That evening, Jack went to a boxing gym in Santa Monica. He needed to blow off some steam. Tony, his trainer, noticed his mood. "Hey, Jack," Tony said, holding up the punching bag. "You're like a tank today. What happened?" "The house is a mess," Jack said, striking out. "But I'll sort it out." "Wife?" Tony asked, grinning. "Stealing your beer again?" "Not just beer," Jack said, hitting harder. "But it'll all be back in place soon." "Sounds serious," Tony said. "If anything happens, call me. I'll help." "I can handle it," Jack said. "But thanks." After training, Jack stopped at a cafe to meet Mark. The lawyer was waiting for him at a table with a laptop. "Jack," Mark said, shaking his hand, "I've started working on the papers. Your evidence is good, but we need more." "There will be more," Jack said, sitting down. "I'm working on it." "You're up to something, aren't you?" Mark asked, looking at him. "You're too calm." "Is that bad?" Jack said, smiling. "It's scary," Mark said. "Just be careful. Nothing illegal." "All clear," Jack said. "When will the papers be ready?" "By the end of the week," Mark said. "I'll call." "Okay," Jack said. "Keep me posted." He returned home late. Caitlin was sleeping. Jack Reynolds stood in front of a drugstore on Wilshire Boulevard in Beverly Hills. It was 7:30 in the morning, and the city was just waking up. Coffee shops were filling up, and traffic was starting to form. Today was a big day. Yesterday, Edward Crowe had agreed to move his business trip to New York for one day, giving Jack a chance to catch Caitlin and her lover, Brad Taylor, in his own home. But just catching them wasn't enough. Jack wanted them to remember this moment for a long time. He walked into a drugstore that smelled of hand sanitizer and coffee from a machine in the corner. Behind the counter stood a woman in her 50s, with short gray hair and a name tag that said Doris. Jack walked up to the shelf of medications, studying the labels carefully. He wanted a strong medicine that would work quickly, but would not cause harm. He settled on a tasteless, odorless liquid that was designed to work quickly. The package said the effects would begin in 30 minutes and last for several hours. "Can I help you?" Doris asked, noticing that Jack had been standing by the shelf for a long time. "Yes," Jack said, turning to face her. "How does it work?" Doris took the box and read the description. "Very effective. Usually works in half an hour, sometimes faster. Needs to be mixed with liquid. Dose is 1 tablespoon per adult weight. Safe if not exceeded." "What if you mix it with alcohol?" Jack asked, trying to sound casual. "Like beer or wine?" Doris looked at him with mild surprise. "Not recommended, but it won't hurt. Alcohol can speed up the effect. Why do you ask?" "Friends have problems," Jack said with a shrug. "I want to make sure it works." "It will work," Doris said, smiling. "Just tell your friend not to overdo it. 1 spoonful, no more." "Got it," said Jack. "I'll take 2 bottles." Doris nodded and scanned the item at the register. $28, cash or card? "Card," Jack said, holding out the credit card. He left the drugstore with a bag containing 2 bottles. In the car, Jack opened one and read the instructions again. The dosage was clear: 1 tablespoon for a person weighing up to 80 kilograms. Caitlin weighed about 60, Brad, judging by his photo, about 80. Jack decided to use everything wisely. He did not want to poison anyone, just give them an unpleasant evening. Jack drove home, going over the details. Caitlin and Brad had planned to meet on Monday when they thought he would be flying to New York. The rescheduled business trip would allow Jack to be home by 6. He knew they would drink his beer and her wine, a habit they had become accustomed to, judging by the bottles that kept disappearing. The cure would make their date unforgettable. The house was quiet. Caitlin had gone to her morning yoga class as usual. Jack walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and checked the contents. His Hazy Hero IPA was still there, 5 bottles. Caitlin's bottle of Chardonnay, half empty, was on the door. The only other things in the fridge were 2 cans of soda and a bottle of water. Great. They wouldn't have much choice. "It works," Jack said, closing the door. He took out the beer and wine and placed them on the counter. Then he opened the drawer where he kept his tools and found a small syringe for precise dosing. Jack measured out half a tablespoon of the laxative and carefully injected it into 1 bottle of beer through the cap, using a thin needle. He shook the bottle to mix the liquids. He did the same with 3 other bottles of beer and a bottle of wine, carefully wiping the caps to make sure there were no traces. "No chance," he said, putting the drinks back in the fridge. Jack made sure everything looked normal. He put the syringe and the bottles of medicine in the safe in the office, locking it with a combination. Caitlin didn't know the combination, and he didn't want her to accidentally find something suspicious. Everything had to look natural. At that moment, his phone vibrated. It was Mike, his friend, who was collecting information about Brad. "Jack," Mike said when he answered, "found something. Brad was in your area yesterday. Geolocation in his stories, bar 2 miles from your house. He was visiting me, Jack said, clutching the phone. The beer's gone missing again. Seriously, Mike said. This guy is cheeky. Do you want me to follow him? No more, said Jack. I see, Mike said. You're up to something, aren't you? You seem too calm. I'm always calm, Jack said. Thank you, Mike. You're welcome, Mike said. Just don't make trouble. Jack hung up and walked into the living room. The camera on the shelf was still rolling. He opened the app and checked the footage. Caitlin had been chatting on the phone yesterday, but she hadn't said anything new about Brad. Caitlin returned at 11 o'clock. Jack heard the door open and came out of the office. She threw her gym bag on the couch and headed for the kitchen. Hi, he said, standing in the doorway. How's yoga? It's fine, Caitlin said, opening the refrigerator. She pulled out a bottle of water. Brad really got the best of us today. Brad, Jack said, watching her. You're constantly at his training. Caitlin looked at him, narrowing her eyes. He's the coach, Jack. That's his job. What are you starting again? Nothing, Jack said, shrugging. Caitlin rolled her eyes and headed upstairs. I need to shower. Then I'm going to Sarah's. Jack returned to the office. At noon, Jack drove to Edward Crow's office. The boss was getting ready to meet with partners, and Jack checked the room as usual. Crow noticed his silence. Jack, Crow said, sitting at the table. Have you taken care of your personal matters? Almost, Jack said, checking the window. Thanks for rescheduling the trip. You're welcome, Crow said. But you look like you're preparing for surgery. Is everything okay? Everything is under control, Jack said. I promise. Okay, Crow said. You're sure you won't get into trouble with the law while you're sorting this out? I need you in New York 100%. No, I'll be 100, Jack said. After his shift, Jack stopped at a boxing gym in Santa Monica. Tony, his trainer, met him at ringside. When Jack returned home at 10 o'clock in the evening, he found Caitlin in the living room. She was sitting with her phone, scrolling through something. You're late, Caitlin said, still looking up from her phone. Work, said Jack. And you? What are you doing? Nothing, she said, just resting. Okay, Jack said. I'm leaving for New York tomorrow. 5 days. Caitlin looked at him, her eyes flashing for a second. Oh, yeah, you said. When's the flight? Monday morning, Jack said, watching her. I'll be back on Friday. Okay, she said, returning to the phone. Have a nice trip. Thank you, Jack said, hiding his smile. Jack Reynolds stood in the kitchen of his Beverly Hills townhouse, staring at the refrigerator. It was 6 o'clock on a Monday morning, and the house was silent except for the gentle hum of the air conditioner. He had picked up the divorce papers from his lawyer, Mark Levin, the day before, and they were sitting in a safe in his office, ready for the big moment. Laxatives, carefully mixed into beer and wine, were waiting in the fridge. Jack checked everything one more time. Caitlin's 4 bottles of Hazy Hero IPA and a full bottle of Chardonnay were in their places, the caps carefully wiped down so as not to arouse suspicion. There were almost no other drinks, just 1 can of soda and half a bottle of water. Caitlin and Brad would choose alcohol, he was sure of it. Jack closed the refrigerator and picked up the suitcase he had packed for show. Today, he would pretend to leave for New York with Edward Crow, even though the trip had been rescheduled for tomorrow. Caitlin, convinced he was at the airport, would invite Brad into the house. Jack would return at 6 o'clock, find them trapped, and hand her the papers. He felt a cold satisfaction as he imagined this moment. Caitlin came down to the kitchen at 6:30, wearing a tracksuit and her hair in a ponytail. She looked sleepy, but her eyes lit up when she saw Jack with the suitcase. Leaving already? She asked, opening the cupboard and taking out a box of cereal. Yes, Jack said, putting his suitcase down by the door. The flight is at 9. We need to be at the airport early. How long will you be there? She said, pouring milk into a bowl. Her tone was casual, but Jack noticed her glance at him. 5 days, Jack said, watching her. I'll be back Friday night. I see, Caitlin said, sitting down at the counter. Well, good luck out there. Don't overwork Crow. I'll try, Jack said, smiling slightly. And what will you do? Caitlin shrugged, looking into the bowl. The usual. Yoga, seeing Sarah, maybe a spa. Spa, Jack repeated, nodding. Sounds relaxing. Well, you have to spoil yourself, she said, finally looking at him. Her smile was strained. You don't mind, do you? Why should I mind? Jack said, taking the keys. Do whatever you want. Caitlin narrowed her eyes, but said nothing. Jack came out of the kitchen, feeling the tension in the air between them. She hadn't suspected he knew about her plans. He went to the garage, got into the Jeep, and drove out, but instead of heading to the airport, he headed to Crow's office. He would spend the day there, pretending to prepare for the trip. In a skyscraper in downtown Los Angeles, Jack walked into Crow's office. Edward was sitting at his desk, reviewing reports on his laptop. He was wearing a dark blue suit and had a mug of coffee next to him. Jack, Crow said, looking up. You're early. Everything okay? Yeah, boss, Jack said, standing by the door. I wanted to check the schedule for tomorrow. Make sure everything's ready. You're always prepared, Crow said, leaning back in his chair. But you're a little on edge today. Is it about the house? Jack paused, choosing his words. I'm solving the problem. It'll all end today. Crow nodded, not looking away. Okay, the main thing is that it doesn't distract you in New York. We have important negotiations there. It won't distract me, Jack said. I'm focused. I believe you, said Crow. If anything happens, my door is open. You know that. Thank you, Jack said. I appreciate it. He left his office and went to the security room, where he checked the building's security footage. It was routine, but today it was a distraction. Jack pulled out his phone and opened the house camera app. At 9 in the morning, Caitlin left the kitchen, grabbed her bag, and left, probably to the gym. He knew she'd be back by lunchtime, getting ready to meet Brad. Jack called Mike, his friend who was following Brad Taylor. Mike, Jack said when he answered, where's our guy? Morning, bro, Mike said, yawning. Brad's at Pulse Fitness right now, teaching a workout. I checked his social media, and he posted a story from the gym. Looks like he's free tonight. Good, Jack said. Keep an eye on him. If he comes into my area, let me know. Are you going to catch him? Mike asked, his voice becoming more serious. Not really, Jack said. I just want to know. Okay, Mike said. But Jack, you're not telling me everything. What's going on? You'll find out soon enough, Jack said. Just do as I ask. Okay, Mike said. I'm in. Jack hung up and went back to work. He checked Crow's routes, contacted security in New York, and prepared a report. But his mind was at home. He pictured Caitlin opening the fridge, grabbing wine, and Brad grabbing a beer. In half an hour, they would run to the bathrooms, and he would walk into the house with the paperwork. At noon, Jack stopped at a nearby cafe to get something to eat. There he met Tony, his trainer from the boxing gym, who came in for a bite to eat. Jack, Tony said, sitting down across from him with a burger. You look like you're getting ready for a fight. What's up? I'm flying to New York tomorrow, Jack said, biting into his sandwich. Lots of work. Don't spill it, Tony said, grinning. This doesn't work. This is your wife, right? You said she shared your beer. Jack chuckled. Not just beer anymore, but I'm almost there. Almost, Tony said, raising an eyebrow. Sounds like you need some sparring to blow off some steam. Maybe after New York, Jack said. Right now, I need a clear head. I understand, said Tony. But if anything happens, I'm in the hall. Come over and we'll beat each other's faces in. We have a deal, said Jack, finishing his coffee. He returned to the office, continuing to pretend it was a normal day. At 3 o'clock, Mike sent a text. Brad finished at the gym. He's heading toward Beverly Hills. His car showed up on your street cam. Jack clutched his phone, so Caitlin had already invited him. He wrote, "Watch. When he comes into my house, confirm." "Got it," Mike replied. Jack checked the cameras at home. Caitlin had returned at 2, taken a shower, and was sitting in the living room with her phone. She sent someone a text message, then smiled. Jack knew who it was for. He closed the app and focused on his work so as not to break down too early. At 5 o'clock in the evening, Crow called him into his office. "Jack," Crow said, signing the papers. "We leave tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Are you ready?" "Yes, boss," Jack said. "Everything is under control." "You've been on edge all day," Crow said, looking at him. "Did you really decide everything at home?" "I'll decide by the evening," said Jack. "I promise." Crow nodded. "Okay, go and rest. You need to be fresh tomorrow." "I will," said Jack, leaving. He got into the Jeep and drove home, but stopped a few blocks away from the mansion so as not to scare Caitlin. Mike sent another text. "Brad parked at your house. Came inside at 5:30. Jack looked at his watch. 5:45. He gave them time to settle in. He knew the laxative would take effect half an hour after they drank. He would wait until 6, go in, and finish it. Jack opened the glove compartment and pulled out the folder with the divorce papers. He flipped through them, making sure everything was there. The prenuptial agreement, the evidence, the agreement. Caitlin would lose everything. He put the folder in his bag and started the engine. "The time has come," he said, driving out into the street. Jack felt the adrenaline coursing through his veins, but his mind remained cool. He wasn't going to scream or fight. He was just going to go in, do what he had to do. Caitlin and Brad had destroyed themselves. He was just pushing them to the finish line. Caitlin Reynolds stood in the living room of her Beverly Hills mansion, adjusting the candles on the coffee table. It was 5 p.m. on a Monday, and the house was ready for her plan. Jack, her husband, had flown to New York with his boss, or so she thought. She checked her phone. A text from Jack, sent at 9 a.m., said he was at the airport. 5 days of freedom. Caitlin smiled, imagining an evening with Brad Taylor, her trainer from the gym. She put on a tight black dress, let her blonde hair down, and turned on a jazz playlist to set the mood. Brad was due to arrive at 5:30. Caitlin walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and looked at the contents. 4 bottles of Hazy Hero IPA, Jack's favorite, sat on the shelf. Her bottle of Chardonnay was next to it, open but almost full. She noticed that the soda and water were almost gone, 1 can and half a bottle. No problem. Brad always drank beer, and she preferred wine. "Perfect," she said, closing the door. Caitlin got out 2 wine glasses and set them on the counter. She wanted it to be romantic, but not too over the top. Brad wasn't one for subtlety, but she knew how to impress him. She checked her phone. Brad had texted that he'd be there in 10 minutes. Caitlin adjusted her dress and walked into the living room, where the dim lights and candles made it cozy. At 5:25, the front door opened. Caitlin had left it unlocked for Brad. He walked in, dressed in jeans and a white shirt, with a perfect haircut and a tan smile. He was holding a bouquet of daisies in his hands, cheap ones, but Caitlin pretended to be touched. "Brad, are you serious?" she said, taking the flowers. "These are so sweet." "For you," Brad said with a wink. "You look great, Kate." "Thank you," she said, placing the bouquet in a vase. "Come in and make yourself comfortable." Brad walked into the living room, looking around. "Damn, this house is like something out of a magazine. Is your husband really in New York?" "Yeah," Caitlin said, smiling. "He left this morning. 5 days, no worries." "Cool," Brad said, sitting down on the couch. "Then let's have fun." Caitlin laughed and went to the kitchen. "What would you like to drink? There's beer, wine." "Beer, as usual," Brad said, lounging on the couch. "What your husband drinks. What's it called? Hazy or something." "Hazy Hero," Caitlin said, opening the fridge. Jack's favorite. You're lucky he left a few bottles. Go ahead, Brad said. What about you? Wine, of course, she said, taking out a Chardonnay and a bottle of beer. She poured the wine into a glass, opened a beer for Brad, and returned to the living room. Brad took the bottle, took a long swig, and nodded. Not bad, he said. Your husband knows his stuff, though. You bet, Caitlin said, sitting down next to him. She raised her glass. In the evening. Here's to us, Brad said, clinking glasses with the bottle. Without prying eyes. They drank, and Caitlin felt the warmth of the wine spread through her body. She leaned closer to Brad, placing her hand on his knee. He smiled, set the beer down on the table, and wrapped his arm around her waist. You're absolutely stunning today, he said, looking into her eyes. That dress, damn. I tried, Caitlin said with a chuckle. You're not bad either. Brad leaned down and kissed her. Caitlin responded, feeling the adrenaline mixing with the wine. They kissed for a few minutes until Brad pulled away to take another sip of beer. Caitlin finished her glass and reached for the bottle, pouring another. Easy, Brad said, grinning, or we won't have time to have fun. We'll make it, she said, sipping her wine. This is my evening. Our evening, Brad corrected, pulling her closer. They continued kissing, and Brad began to unbutton his shirt. Caitlin helped him, laughing when he got his hands tangled in the sleeve. She kicked off her shoes and pulled him towards her, feeling the moment grow hotter. They moved to the couch, and Brad began to pull her dress down. Wait, Caitlin said, giggling. Maybe upstairs? It's more comfortable there. It's fine right here, Brad said, kissing her neck. No one's coming. Exactly, she said, relaxing. They continued, and Caitlin felt her head spinning from the wine. Brad was in his element, his hands sliding over her body. But then he froze, and there was a loud, awkward sound. Brad farted, and the smell hit her nose. Oh shit, he said, pulling away. His face was flushed. Sorry, it's probably lunch. Caitlin laughed, trying to hide her awkwardness. Relax, it happens. But a second later, she felt a sharp spasm in her stomach. She tried to ignore it, but then she made the same sound, loud and clear. Her eyes widened in horror. Oh my God, she said, covering her mouth. It wasn't me. Brad looked at her, then burst out laughing. Yeah, right. Girls don't fart. But the laughter quickly turned to panic. Caitlin felt another spasm, stronger than the last. Her stomach twisted, and she knew she wouldn't make it to the bedroom. Brad clutched his stomach, too, his face turning pale. Shit, something's wrong, he said, standing up. Where's the bathroom? There, Caitlin said, pointing to the guest bathroom in the hallway. Run! Brad bolted, nearly tripping over the coffee table. Caitlin jumped up, clutching her stomach, and ran to the second-floor master bathroom. She slammed the door shut just before she reached the toilet. Her heart was pounding and her thoughts were racing. What was going on? Wine? Food? What the hell? She screamed, sitting in the bathroom. This is not normal. Brad's voice came from the hallway, muffled by the guest bathroom door. Kate, that beer. Something's wrong with it. Not beer, she shouted back. I was drinking wine. Oh God, I feel sick. Me too, Brad said, his voice panicked. Maybe we've been poisoned. Caitlin tried to stand up, but another spasm forced her back down. She pulled her phone out of the pocket of her dress, which was still hanging off her, and dialed Sarah, her friend. Sarah, she said when she answered, I'm in trouble. I'm in the bathroom, and I'm sick. What? Sarah said, her voice full of worry. What did you eat? Drink? Wine, Caitlin said, almost crying. And Brad drank beer. We both. Damn, this is terrible. Brad, Sarah said. Is he there? Kate, you said Jack was home. Jack's in New York, said Caitlin. But something's wrong. It's like, I don't know, like we've been poisoned. Calm down, Sarah said. Maybe it's food. Have you been somewhere? No, said Caitlin. Not until home. Oh, Sarah, I feel so bad. Okay, breathe, Sarah said. Drink water, try to get out. If it gets worse, call 911. I can't get out, Caitlin said. I'm busy. Sarah paused, then said, Kate, this isn't funny. What are you going to do? I don't know, Caitlin said, throwing the phone on the floor. She heard Brad groaning downstairs, muttering something about stupid beer. Caitlin tried to pull herself together, but the spasms wouldn't stop. She didn't understand what was happening. Wine was her favorite, she'd had it 100 times. Jack's beer was just as ordinary, but something was wrong and she was panicking. Jack Reynolds pulled his black Jeep Grand Cherokee to a stop 2 blocks from his Beverly Hills mansion. It was 5:50 on a Monday night, and the sun was setting, painting the sky orange. He turned off the engine and checked his phone. A text from his friend Mike confirmed that Brad Taylor had entered the house at 5:30. Cameras in the living room and kitchen showed Caitlin and Brad opening beer and wine from the refrigerator around 5:40. Jack knew the laxatives he had slipped them that morning would take effect in half an hour. By 6, they would be locked in their bathrooms, panicked and humiliated. He smiled, but it was a cold, sarcastic smile. Everything was going according to plan. Jack grabbed his bag from the back seat, where he had a folder of divorce papers prepared by attorney Mark Levin. The prenuptial agreement was ironclad. Caitlin's infidelity had cost her everything: her home, her money, her future. He imagined her reading the papers in the bathtub, her world crumbling. But first, he wanted to add a personal touch. He got out of the car, the key to the Jeep in his hand. A block away, Jack spotted Brad's red Mustang parked in front of his house. It was new, shiny, bought on credit, Mike had said. Jack looked around. The street was empty. He walked up to the car, crouched down by the rear fender, and ran the key across the paint, leaving a deep scratch from the bumper to the door. The sound of metal on metal was barely audible, but Jack felt a sense of satisfaction. It was a small bonus for Brad, who thought he could steal his beer and his wife. A small thing, but damn nice. Have a nice trip home, Jack muttered, putting the key in his pocket. He adjusted his jacket to hide the holster of his Glock 19 and headed for the house. The suitcase he had taken for show was in the car. He had no intention of staying. Jack inserted the key into the lock, quietly opened the door, and walked in. The living room smelled of the candles Caitlin had lit for her romantic evening, and something not very pleasant. An empty beer bottle and a glass with the remains of wine sat on the coffee table. Jazz was playing softly, but the house was suspiciously silent. Jack listened. There was a muttering coming from the guest bathroom down the hall, and muffled groans from the master bath above. The medicine had worked. Jack put his bag down, pulled out a folder of papers, and walked to the stairs. He stopped at the guest bathroom door and knocked loudly, his voice full of sarcasm. "I'm home, assholes, come out," he said, drawing out the words. A muffled cry came from the bathroom. Brad seemed to be trying to say something, but his voice was shaking. "Who's there?" he shouted. "Is that you, Kate?" Jack chuckled, but didn't answer. He wasn't going to waste words on Brad. Instead, he went up to the second floor, to the master bathroom, where Caitlin had locked herself. He knocked on the door, even louder. "Caitlin, I'm home," he said, his tone sharp. "Come out, honey. It's time to talk. Like if you think traitors should be held accountable for their actions. And subscribe so you don't miss new stories where the truth tears, not only masks." "Jack?" Her voice was full of panic. "You're in New York. What are you doing here?" "Surprise," said Jack, leaning against the door. "Open up, or should I come in?" "I can't," she screamed. I feel sick. Go away." "Bad?" Jack said, feigning surprise. "Honey, what happened? Did you shit yourself? Maybe it was the wine, or your guest downstairs." Caitlin paused, then her voice grew quieter. "What are you talking about? What guest?" "Don't play with me," Jack said, his smile fading. "I know about Brad." "Are you crazy?" she shouted. but there was uncertainty in her voice. "Go away, Jack. I'm not in the mood." Jack pulled the papers out of the folder and carefully slid them under the door. "Read this, Caitlin. This is the divorce agreement and the contract you signed. Remember? Cheating. You lose everything." "What?" Her voice broke. "What documents?" "Jack, you can't." "I can," he said, stepping away from the door. "You have a week to get out of my house, and don't you dare take anything but your clothes. I'll check." "You wouldn't dare," she shouted, but there was panic in her voice. "This is my house, too." "Not yours," Jack said. "Read the contract, and tell Brad his car got a little scratched. An accident." He heard her grab the papers, the rustle of pages. Caitlin began to mumble, her voice shaking. "It's not true. You can't." "I don't." Jack didn't listen. He walked downstairs, past the guest bathroom where Brad was still moaning, tossed him a quick, nice car, dude, and picked up his bag. He wasn't going to stay. Caitlin got what she deserved, and Brad was just a pawn who got in the way. Jack walked out of the house, closed the door, and got into the Jeep. His heart was beating steadily, and his mind was clear. He had done what he wanted. In the car, he called Mike. "Mike," Jack said when he answered. "It's all done. They're in the house, in the bathrooms. Caitlin has the papers." "Damn, brother," Mike said, his voice full of surprise. "What happened?" "Whatever it takes," Jack said. "Is Brad still there?" "His car's still there," Mike said. "I'm watching. Do you want me to stay?" "No need," Jack said. "He'll be gone soon. Just make sure he leaves." "I get it," Mike said. "Jack, are you okay? This isn't a joke." "I'm fine," Jack said. "Better than ever." He hung up and drove to Edward Crow's office. He told his boss he'd be sleeping in the security room to prepare for the next day's flight. Crow didn't mind, and Jack wanted to be away from home until Caitlin started packing. In the office, Jack walked into Crow's office. Edward was sitting at his desk, looking over reports. "Jack," Crow said, looking up, "you said you'd decide today. Have you decided?" "Yes," said Jack, standing at the door. "Case closed." Crow nodded, studying him. "You look lighter. What happened?" "Divorce," Jack said, without going into detail. "She got the papers. Now it's her turn." "Divorce?" Crow whistled. "This is serious. Are you sure you can handle it?" "I've already done it," Jack said. "I'm ready for New York tomorrow." "Okay," said Crow. "If anything happens, I'm here. You know." "I know," Jack said. "Thanks, boss." He walked out and into the guard room where there was a cot for the night shift. Jack lay down, but did not sleep. Jack did not feel joy, but he felt justice. They had chosen this path themselves. The next day, he'll fly away with Crow, leaving Caitlin to deal with the aftermath. And then he'll start a new life without her. Caitlin Reynolds sat on the cold tile floor of the master bathroom of her Beverly Hills townhouse, her back pressed against the door. It was 6:15 on a Monday night, and her world was crumbling. She clutched the papers that Jack, her husband, had slipped under the door minutes earlier. Her stomach was still churning, the laxatives in the wine still working. She couldn't believe this was happening. "No, no, no," she muttered, her voice shaking. "It can't be true." She dropped the papers on the floor and grabbed her phone, which was lying nearby. The screen was cracked. She had dropped it when she tried to stand up during one of her spasms. Caitlin opened the contact of Sarah, her friend, and pressed call. Sarah answered on the third ring. "Kate," Sarah said, her voice worried. "Are you okay? You called an hour ago, saying you weren't feeling well." "Sarah, it's terrible," Caitlin said, her voice breaking into a sob. "Jack's back. He knows about Brad. He slipped me divorce papers." "What?" Sarah gasped. "Wait, how did he come back?" "He's in New York." "Not in New York," Caitlin screamed, wiping away tears. "He was here. He knew, Sarah. He knew everything." "Okay, breathe," Sarah said. "Where are you now? Are you okay?" "I'm in the bathroom," Caitlin said, her voice shaking. I'm sick, Sarah. Something about the wine. Or the food. I don't know. And Brad, he's downstairs in the other bathroom. Both of us. Damn, this is a nightmare. Oh my God, Kate, Sarah said. What documents? What did he give you? Caitlin looked at the papers scattered across the floor. The divorce and our contract. It says if I cheat, I lose everything. The house, the money, everything. He said I had a week to get out. A week, Sarah said. Is he serious? Kate, this is no joke. You need a lawyer. What lawyer? Caitlin screamed. You don't understand. The contract is signed. I signed it myself. He proved that I'm with Brad. He has video, photos. A photo? Sarah fell silent. Kate, you said you were careful. I was careful, Caitlin said, her voice rising. But he was watching me. He knew Brad would be here. Okay, calm down, Sarah said. I'll come. Where's Brad? Can he help? I don't know, Caitlin said. He's in the guest bathroom. Jack was yelling something about him, but I didn't hear him. Sarah, I need something for this nightmare. Go to the drugstore, get something to stop it. Please. What should I buy? Sarah asked. For poisoning? Or what? I don't know, said Caitlin, clutching the phone. Something from my stomach. Ask there. Tell them I'm sick. And come over. I can't go out. Okay, Sarah said. I'm in the car now. I'll be there in half an hour. Hang in there, Kate. Hurry, Caitlin said, throwing the phone on the floor. She pulled her knees up to her chest, trying to breathe evenly. The spasms had eased a bit, but she was afraid to get up. Caitlin glanced at the papers lying next to her. She picked them up again, reading them over. The infidelity clause was in bold. If proven unfaithful, she would lose her right to property, bills, child support. Jack had attached printouts, screenshots of the CCTV footage of her arranging to meet Brad, photos from the cafe where they had hugged. Her own words, overheard by him, were quoted in the appendix. She was cornered. How did he do it? She whispered, her eyes filling with tears. How did he know? Caitlin remembered Jack asking questions about her training, about Sarah, about Brad. She thought he was just curious, but now she realized he was digging. He was watching. She had underestimated him, and now she was paying the price. She wanted to scream, but she couldn't. Instead, she grabbed her phone and dialed Brad. He didn't answer. Caitlin frowned and tried again. Silence. She heard a rustling sound downstairs, like someone was moving around the living room. Caitlin opened the bathroom door and called out. Brad, are you there? Answer me. No answer. She closed the door, feeling panic rising. Brad was in the guest bathroom. She could hear him groaning. But now it was quiet. Caitlin tried to stand, but another spasm forced her back down. She slammed her fist on the floor, muttering curses. Downstairs in the guest bathroom, Brad Taylor sat with his head in his hands. His stomach was still churning, but the worst seemed to be over. He heard Jack yelling, his sarcastic, "I'm home, assholes," and he knew they'd been caught. When Jack mentioned the papers and Brad, he knew things were bad. Caitlin was married to this guy, and he clearly wasn't going to forgive. Brad didn't want to get caught up in their mess. He just wanted out. Brad opened the bathroom door and listened. The house was quiet, except for the sound of Caitlin on the phone from upstairs. Jack seemed to be gone. Brad grabbed his shirt from the living room and put it on without buttoning it. His jeans were there, too, by the couch. He put on his shoes, trying not to make any noise, and headed for the back door that led out to the garden. He knew his car was parked out front, but he didn't want to risk going out the front. If Jack was still there, it was best not to cross paths. Sorry, Kate, he muttered, opening the back door. This is your shit. Brad slipped out into the garden, walked around the perimeter of the house, and reached his car. He noticed a long scratch on the rear wing and cursed. Damn, that psycho, he said, looking around. The street was empty. Brad got into the Mustang, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. Caitlin was alone. Caitlin, still in the bathroom, didn't know Brad had run away. She dialed his number again, but he didn't answer. She threw the phone down and cried, burying her face in her knees. Her life that she had so carefully built, the fancy house, the parties, the status, had crumbled in one night. Jack had won, and there was nothing she could do. Half an hour later, Sarah knocked on the mansion door. Caitlin heard the knock through the open bathroom door and called out, "Sarah, I'm upstairs. The door is open." Sarah walked in, her footsteps echoing in the living room. She walked up to the second floor, holding a first aid bag. "Kate, where are you?" "In the bathroom," Caitlin said, her voice weak. "The door on the left." Sarah opened the door and gasped when she saw Caitlin on the floor, her eyes red and papers scattered. "Oh my God, Kate, what's wrong?" "It's over," Caitlin said, looking at her. "Jack knows. He's filed for divorce. I'm losing everything." Sarah sat down next to him, putting the bag on the floor. "Okay, tell me, what's in these papers?" Caitlin handed her the papers. "It's a contract. If I cheat, I get nothing. And he has proof. Videos, photos, everything." Sarah flipped through the pages, her expression darkening. "That's bad, Kate. He's prepared. Where's Brad?" "I don't know," Caitlin said, her voice breaking. "He's downstairs, but he's not answering. Maybe he's in shock, too." Sarah got up and went down to the living room, looked into the guest bathroom. Empty. She went back upstairs. "Kate, he's not there. The garden door is open. It looks like he's escaped." "Ran away," Caitlin stared at her. "This coward abandoned me." "Looks like it," Sarah said, sitting down next to him. "Kate, you need to pull yourself together. Here, I bought some charcoal and something for diarrhea. Try drinking it." Caitlin took the bag, but her hands were shaking. "Sarah, what should I do? I have nothing. No home, no money. Jack said, 1 week and I have to go." "We'll figure something out," Sarah said, hugging her. "Maybe the lawyer can find a way out. Or talk to Jack. Maybe he'll relent." "He won't relent," Caitlin said, shaking her head. "You didn't hear him. He was. Like a machine. He planned it all." Sarah sighed. "Then you need to go. Pack your things, move in with me, and then we'll figure it out." Caitlin nodded, but her eyes were empty. She had lost everything she had in one night. Brad had left her, Jack had destroyed her, and she couldn't even get up off the floor. She took the pills Sarah had brought and swallowed them, hoping the cramps would stop. But the pain in her chest was worse. She knew this was just the beginning. Jack Reynolds sat in the leather seat of a private jet flying from Los Angeles to New York. It was 8 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, and the rising sun was illuminating the clouds outside. Across from him, at a small table, Edward Crowe, his boss and media mogul, was reviewing documents on a tablet. The plane was luxurious. Soft lighting, a bar stocked with whiskey and coffee, a flight attendant ready to cater to his every need. But Jack barely noticed. His thoughts were on the night before, when he'd walked into his Beverly Hills mansion, caught Caitlin and her lover Brad in their bathrooms on laxatives, and slipped her divorce papers. She'd been given a week to clear out, and Jack knew she wouldn't dare take anything more. He felt relieved, but not happy. 5 years of marriage were over, and although he had gotten justice, there was still an emptiness. Jack glanced at the folder of Crowe's contracts lying next to him. Work was a distraction, and he was grateful for this trip. New York would give him 5 days to reset. Edward put the tablet down and looked at Jack. His graying hair was neatly combed, and his dark blue suit looked like it cost more than the average person's annual salary. "Jack," Edward said, sipping coffee from a porcelain cup, "you said yesterday that you had your affairs taken care of. Would you like to share?" Jack paused, looking out the window. He trusted Crowe, but he didn't want to reveal everything. The laxative, the scratch on Brad's car, it was too personal. But part of the truth was worth telling. Edward deserved it for surviving the business trip without asking too many questions. "This is Caitlin," Jack said, turning to face him. I filed for divorce. Edward raised an eyebrow, but wasn't surprised. Divorce? That's a big step. What happened? She cheated on me, Jack said, his voice even. With a trainer from her gym. I found out, got the evidence, and handed her the papers yesterday. Shit, Edward said, leaning back in his chair. This is shit, Jack. How did you find this out? She wasn't careful, Jack said with a shrug. Strange behavior, beer disappearing from the fridge. I started watching and set up cameras. Found everything I needed. Edward nodded, his face growing serious. Cameras, then. You didn't waste any time. I couldn't let her think I was blind, Jack said. We had a contract. If she cheated, she lost everything. The house, the money. I gave her a week to get out. Harsh, Edward said, but there was approval in his voice. But fair. She knew what she was signing up for. I knew, Jack said, looking at his hands, but I did it anyway. Edward finished his coffee and put the cup on the table. You know, I went through this. My first wife, Linda, 20 years ago, I caught her with my business partner. It was a blow, Jack. But I did the same thing you did. Gathered evidence, filed for divorce, and left her with nothing. Jack looked at him. Edward rarely talked about personal matters, and this was unexpected. How did you cope? Work, Edward said, grinning, and a couple of bottles of whiskey. But the main thing is, I didn't let her break me. You won't either. You're stronger than she thinks. I don't feel strong, Jack said, allowing himself to be honest for the first time that day. I just did what I had to. That's strength, Edward said. You didn't lose your temper or make a scene. You planned it and followed through. That's more than most people can do. Jack nodded, but said nothing. He didn't want to tell how he had mixed laxatives into beer and wine, or how he had scratched Brad's car. That was his personal satisfaction, and Edward didn't need the details. What now? Edward asked, looking at him. She leaves, and then what? I'm moving on, Jack said. I'll come back and make sure she's gone. I'll sell the house and start over. Good plan, Edward said. But you know what you need? Rest. This week in New York will be hard meetings, negotiations. But after that, I'll give you a couple of days. A hotel in Manhattan, tickets to a show, dinner somewhere nice. My gift. Jack looked at him, surprised. Seriously? Seriously, Edward said. You're my best man, Jack. 3 years without a single mistake. You deserve a break. Thank you, Jack said, feeling some of the tension melt away. I appreciate it. No thanks, Edward said, waving his hand. Just be prepared for the meetings tomorrow. These investors are sharks. We need to put the squeeze on them. We'll press, Jack said, opening the folder with the contracts. I've already read their proposals. They think they can outsmart us. Edward laughed. That's why I'm keeping you. Come on, tell me what you found. They spent the rest of the flight discussing strategy. Jack was grateful for the work. It took his mind off Caitlin, the empty house, and being alone. Edward was right. He could do it. But first, he had to get through this week. The plane landed at John F. Kennedy Airport at 3 o'clock local time. Jack and Edward climbed into a black Cadillac Escalade that was waiting for them at the terminal. The driver, a burly guy named Tony, nodded to Jack. Mr. Reynolds, Tony said, opening the door. Good to see you. How was the flight? Okay, Jack said, sitting down. What's new in New York? Traffic jams as usual, Tony said, grinning. But I'll get you there quickly. Where to? To the hotel, Edward said, sitting down next to me. The plaza. And no delays. Got it, Tony said, starting the car. On the way to Manhattan, Jack checked his phone. A message from Mike. Brad left at 7 p.m. last night. Caitlin stayed at the house. Her friend came over, left at midnight. Jack wrote, keep an eye on the house. If Caitlin starts taking things out, let me know. I will, Mike replied. Jack put the phone away. He knew Caitlin was panicking, but she wouldn't dare break his terms. A week was all she had. At the Plaza Hotel, they were met by the manager, a tall man in a suit. "Mr. Crow, Mr. Reynolds, welcome. Your rooms are ready." "Very well," Edward said. "Jack, go and get settled. We'll meet in the lobby at 7. Dinner with the partners." "I will," Jack said, taking the key card. His room was on the 15th floor, overlooking Central Park. Jack threw his bag on the bed and walked to the window. New York was humming below. Cars, people, life. He felt cut off from it all, but it was better than being home. He called Mark Levin, his lawyer. "Mark," Jack said when he answered, "the papers have been delivered. She received them yesterday." "Okay," Mark said. "I'll register them today. Did she say anything?" "She panicked," Jack said. "But that's her problem. What next?" "We're waiting for her answer," Mark said. "If she hires a lawyer, we're ready. The contract is impossible to get through. Are you in New York?" "Yes," said Jack. "Work." "Good job," Mark said. "Don't get hung up on it. Call me if anything happens." "Thank you," Jack said, hanging up. He showered, changed into a fresh suit, and went down to the lobby at 7. Edward was waiting for him at the bar, holding a glass of whiskey. "Ready?" Edward asked, finishing his drink. "Always," Jack said. They drove to a restaurant in Manhattan where their partners were waiting. The dinner was long, full of negotiations and subtle hints. Jack was keeping an eye on security, but his thoughts sometimes returned to Caitlin. He imagined her packing her things, calling her friends, looking for a place to live. She got what she deserved. After dinner, Edward pulled Jack aside. "Tomorrow's a tough day, but I'll give you a rest on Friday. Tickets to see Hamilton and dinner at Le Bernardin, already booked." "You don't have to," Jack said, but his voice was grateful. "I must," Edward said. "You keep me safe, I keep you on your toes. Deal?" "Deal," Jack said, smiling for the first time that day. Jack Reynolds stood at the window of his suite on the 18th floor of the St. Regis Hotel in Manhattan. It was a Thursday morning, and New York City was bustling below. Yellow cabs honked, pedestrians hurried down Fifth Avenue, and skyscrapers glittered in the sunlight. The room was luxurious, a spacious bed with crisp white linens, a marble bathroom, a bar stocked with bottles of whiskey, and a view of the city that seemed endless. Edward Crow, his boss, had insisted that Jack stay here rather than at the Standard Hotel where their team usually stayed. It was his way of supporting Jack after his divorce from Caitlin. Jack held a cup of black coffee in his hand, looking out over the city. For the first time in months, he felt light. Caitlin was in the past, locked in the bathroom of her now former home with divorce papers. He had given her a week to get out, and he knew she wouldn't dare break the terms. The evidence of her cheating on him with Brad Taylor videos, photos, overheard conversations was undeniable. Jack had made her pay for her betrayal, and now he was free. He didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time, it didn't scare him. His phone vibrated on the table. A text from Mike, his friend who was watching the Beverly Hills house. Caitlin was moving boxes out yesterday. Her friend was helping. Nothing valuable, just clothes. All quiet. Jack wrote, "Keep watching. If anything happens, let me know." "Got it," Mike replied. Jack put his phone away and finished his coffee. He didn't want to think about Caitlin, but he needed to check. She might try to steal something, despite the contract. But that was a problem for next week. He was in New York now, and Edward had given him a chance to take his mind off things. There was a knock at the door. Jack opened it, and there stood the hotel stewardess, a young woman in a strict uniform, holding an envelope in her hand. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, smiling. "It's from Mr. Crow." "Thank you," Jack said, taking the envelope. She nodded and left. Jack opened the envelope and found 2 tickets to the Broadway musical The Lion King for Friday night and a note. "Jack, after the meetings, relax. Dinner at Per Se is booked for 8 p.m. Enjoy. Edward." Jack shook his head, but smiled. Edward hadn't been kidding when he talked about support. Per Se was a Michelin-starred restaurant, one of the best in town, and The Lion King was the show everyone was talking about. Jack wasn't a fan of musicals, but the idea of an evening away from work seemed like the right thing to do. He changed into a suit and went down to the lobby, where Edward was waiting for him at the exit. The boss was wearing a dark gray suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He was talking on the phone, but when he saw Jack, he ended the call. "Ready?" Edward asked, putting on his sunglasses. "We're meeting with Japanese investors today. They're smart, but we're smarter." "Ready," Jack said, checking the holster under his jacket. "Is there security in place yet?" "Yeah," Edward said. "But you should check anyway. I don't trust them." "I'll do it," Jack said, opening the limousine door. They got into the car, and the driver, the same Tony from the airport, nodded to Jack in the mirror. "Where to, boss?" "Wall Street," Edward said, "and no traffic if you can help it." "I'll try," Tony said as he drove off. On the way, Edward looked at Jack. "Did you get my gift?" "Yeah," Jack said, patting his pocket where the tickets were. "Thanks. Didn't expect that." "You deserve it," Edward said. "After everything you've been through. How are you, by the way? Didn't ask on the plane." Jack shrugged, looking out the window. "Better. It's weird, but it's like I'm breathing again." "I understand," Edward said. "When I divorced Linda, it was the same. First emptiness, then freedom. You're on the right track." "I hope so," Jack said. "I just want to move on." "Get moving," Edward said, "and start Friday. Per Se isn't just a meal, it's an experience. And The Lion King will make you forget about LA for at least a couple of hours." "We'll see," Jack said with a grin. "I'm not a big fan of theaters." "Give me a chance," Edward said. "Sometimes things like that change your perspective." The car stopped at a skyscraper on Wall Street. Jack got out first, looking up and down the street. Two guards from the Japanese delegation stood at the entrance, both in black suits. Jack walked over, introduced himself, and checked their papers. Everything was clear. He returned to Edward. "Okay," Jack said. "We can go." The meeting lasted 3 hours. Jack stood at the door of the conference room, watching every move. The investors were polite, but their questions were pointed. Edward held his own, and by the end they had signed a preliminary agreement. Jack was impressed, but not surprised Crow always knew how to close a deal. After the meeting, they returned to the hotel. Edward suggested having lunch at the rooftop bar. "Come on, Jack," he said, sitting down at a table overlooking the city. "One cocktail wouldn't hurt." "Just one," Jack said, ordering a bourbon. The waiter, a guy in his 30s with a tattoo on his wrist, brought the drinks. "Bourbon for you, sir, and a martini for Mr. Crow." "Thank you," Edward said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings, Jack." "To them," said Jack, clinking glasses. They drank, and Edward looked at him. "Have you thought about what you'll do when you get back? Sell the house?" "Yeah," Jack said. "Too many memories. I'll buy something smaller, closer to the ocean. Maybe Malibu." "Good choice," Edward said. "And the job? Will you stay with me?" "Sure," Jack said. "You're the best boss I've ever had. I'm not leaving." "I'm glad to hear it," Edward said. "But if you want to take a vacation, just say so. It won't hurt you after this." "Maybe later," Jack said. "For now, work keeps me busy." They continued to talk about business, about plans for the coming year. Jack felt New York creeping into him, the noise, the energy, the possibilities. He hadn't been here since he'd accompanied Crow 2 years ago, and then he'd been married, tied down by commitments. Now he was single, and that opened doors he'd never thought possible. On Friday night, Jack put on a navy blazer and headed to a Broadway theater. The Lion King was packed. Families, tourists, couples. Jack took his seat in the center of the room, feeling a little out of place among the dressed-up crowd. But when the curtain went up, he forgot about everything. The music, the costumes, the story, it was powerful. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about Caitlin, about Brad, about the paperwork. He just watched. After the show, Jack drove to Per Se, a restaurant in Columbus Circle. The maitre d', a woman in a formal black dress, showed him to a table by the window overlooking Central Park. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, handing over the menu. "Mr. Crow has ordered the tasting menu for you. Wine?" "Bourbon," Jack said, "straight and without ice." "Of course," she said, leaving. The food was incredible. Dishes Jack couldn't even pronounce, each like a work of art. He ate slowly, savoring it. The waiter, a young guy with an accent, noticed his thoughtfulness. "Is this your first time here?" he asked, pouring water. "Yes," Jack said. "It's unusual." "Per se," said the waiter, smiling. "Come back." "Maybe," Jack said, sipping his bourbon. After dinner, he stepped outside, breathing in the cool air. Manhattan was buzzing with lights, laughter, and street musicians. Jack walked back to his hotel, thinking. He was free. Not just from Caitlin, but from everything that had held him back in the past. He could sell the house, move, even try something new. Maybe get a dog, like he'd always wanted. Or travel when his job allows it. For the first time, he saw the future not as an obligation, but as a choice. Jack Reynolds stepped off a private jet at Lax, squinting into the bright California sun. It was Saturday morning, and the air smelled of salt and asphalt. A week in New York had passed. Tense investor meetings, a luxury hotel room, moments of relaxation given to him by Edward Crow. Jack felt like a different man. Caitlin, his ex-wife, was a thing of the past, along with her betrayal and their broken marriage. He had returned to Los Angeles to close that chapter and begin a new one. Edward Crow walked alongside, carrying a leather briefcase. His navy suit was slightly rumpled from the flight, but he looked cheerful. "Jack," he said, putting on his sunglasses. "Good week. You've been great." "Thanks, boss," Jack said, carrying his bag. The deal with the Japanese was worth it. "Of course," Edward said, grinning. "They thought they'd pull the wool over our eyes. And now what about you? Home?" "Yeah," Jack said. "We need to take care of business. Make sure Caitlin's gone." Edward nodded, his gaze growing serious. "If you need help, just say so. Lawyers, security, whatever." "I can handle it," Jack said, "but I appreciate it." They got into a black Cadillac Escalade waiting at the terminal. The driver, a familiar guy named Carlos, opened the door. "Mr. Crow, Mr. Reynolds, welcome back." "Where to?" "First me to the office," Edward said. "Then Jack comes home." "Got it," Carlos said, starting the car. On the way, Jack checked his phone. A text from Mike, his friend who was keeping an eye on the Beverly Hills mansion. "Caitlin left Wednesday. Only took some clothes and a couple of bags. I checked the house, nothing valuable was touched. She left town, they say, to her sister in San Diego." Jack wrote, "Thanks. Make sure she doesn't come back." "I will," Mike replied. Jack put the phone away, relieved. Caitlin was gone, as he had ordered. The prenup she had signed 5 years ago had robbed her of her home, her money, her future. Her lover, Brad Taylor, had run away the same night Jack had caught them, and by all accounts, he was out of her life. Jack didn't feel sorry for either of them. They had gotten what they deserved. The car stopped at Crow's skyscraper. Edward turned to Jack. "Take a couple of days off. You deserve it. I'll be waiting at the office on Monday." "I will," Jack said, shaking his hand. "Thanks for everything." "You're welcome," Edward said as he walked out. "Keep me posted." Carlos drove Jack to the Beverly Hills mansion. The house looked the same as always. White walls, glass windows, a perfect lawn. But it was empty inside. Jack walked in, dropped his bag by the door, and walked into the living room. The candles Caitlin had lit for her romantic evening with Brad were still sitting on the table, melted. Jack shook his head and threw them in the trash. He checked the house. The bedroom, the closet, the kitchen. Caitlin had taken only her dresses, shoes, and makeup. No jewelry, appliances, or furniture. Jack opened the safe in the office. The divorce papers she had left behind were still there. He sent a photo to Mark Levin, his lawyer. "Mark," Jack said when he answered. "She left. She only took personal things. The papers are still there." "Excellent," Mark said. "I've completed the registration. The divorce is in process. She doesn't contest it, which is surprising." "She has nothing to dispute," Jack said. "The contract has her pinned down." "Right," Mark said. "What now? Selling the house?" "Yeah," Jack said. "I've already contacted a realtor. I want something smaller, further away from here." "Smart," Mark said. "Call me if anything happens. Congratulations, Jack. You're free." "Thank you," Jack said, hanging up. He walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. The beer and wine he had laced with a laxative were gone. Keitlin must have thrown them out in a panic. Jack chuckled, remembering her and Brad running to and fro in the bathrooms. He got out a bottle of water and drank it, standing by the window. The house was too big, too full of memories. It was time to move on. That same day, Jack met the realtor, a woman named Laura, at a cafe in Santa Monica. She was about 40 years old, with short dark hair and a businesslike smile. "Mr. Reynolds," Laura said, opening her laptop, "your Beverly Hills mansion is a tasty morsel. I've already found 3 buyers. How much do you want to sell it for?" "Maximum," Jack said, sipping his coffee. "But quickly, I don't want to drag it out." "I understand," Laura said. "With your location and the condition of the house, I think we'll close for $8 million, maybe more. When are you ready to sign?" "As soon as you find a buyer," Jack said. "And I'm looking for a new house. Smaller, by the ocean. Malibu or Pacific Palisades." "Excellent choice," Laura said, taking notes. "Budget?" "Under $3 million, Jack said. "Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a yard." "We'll find one," Laura said. "I'll send you the options tomorrow. Are you moving alone?" "Yes," Jack said, his voice firm. "One." Laura nodded without asking any further questions. "Okay, I'll take care of it." "Thank you," Jack said, standing up. "Keep me updated." He returned home and began to pack his things. He decided to sell most of the furniture along with the house, taking only personal things, clothes, weapons, and a few books. The rest belonged to the past, which he wanted to forget. A week later, the mansion was sold for $8.5 million. Laura found a buyer, a young couple from Silicon Valley who were moving to Los Angeles. Jack signed the documents and transferred the money to his account. That same day, he looked at a house in Malibu, a 1-story house with wooden floors, large windows, and a small yard overlooking the ocean. The price was $2,700,000. Jack agreed immediately. "When can we move in?" he asked Laura, standing on the terrace of the new house. "In a week," Laura said. "The paperwork is already in progress." "Congratulations, Jack." "Thank you," he said, looking at the waves. "This is what I need." The move was simple. Jack moved his things to Malibu, furnished the house minimally, a bed, a couch, a table. He didn't want to clutter the space. For the first time, he felt like the house belonged only to him. A month after moving in, Jack stopped by an animal shelter in Santa Monica. He had always wanted a dog, but Caitlin had been against it, calling them dirty. Now her opinion didn't matter. At the shelter, he spotted a Labrador Retriever Golden with big brown eyes and a wagging tail. The dog ran up to him, licking his hand. "Who is this?" Jack asked the employee, a young girl named Emma. "This is Hopper," Emma said, smiling. "He's a year old and very friendly. He was given up because his owners moved." "Hopper," Jack repeated, petting the dog. "Can I have Hops?" "Of course," said Emma. "He's yours if you want him." "I do," said Jack. "What do I need to sign?" Emma handed him the papers, and an hour later Jack was driving home with Hops in the back seat. Hops was looking out the window with his tongue hanging out, and Jack laughed for the first time in a long time. "Well, Hops," he said, looking in the mirror, "we're a team now." At home, Hops sniffed every corner and then lay down on the couch as if he'd always lived there. Jack bought him a bowl, toys, and food, setting them all up in the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of new beer, a local IPA called Coastal Haze that he'd found at a nearby brewery. He poured a glass of beer, sat on the deck, and looked out at the ocean. Hops lay down next to him, resting his muzzle on his paws. Jack raised his glass. "To us, buddy." On Monday, he returned to work. Edward met him in the office, holding a mug with his company logo. "Jack," Edward said, shaking his hand, "you look like you've been born again. New home?" "Yes," Jack said. "Malibu. And a dog." "A dog?" Edward laughed. "This is serious. What's the name?" "Hops," Jack said. "A Labrador. Best neighbor I ever had." "Cool," Edward said. "And Caitlin, heard anything?" "She went to San Diego," Jack said. "The divorce is final. She's gone missing." "Okay," Edward said. "Now live for yourself. Any plans?" "Live," Jack said, smiling. "Work, hang out with Hops, drink beer. That's enough." "Simple plan," Edward said. "I like it. We're meeting the Chinese today. Ready?" "Always," Jack said. They walked into the conference room, and Jack took his place by the door, checking security. His job had been his anchor, but it didn't define him anymore. In the evenings, he returned to Malibu, walked the beach with Hops, and listened to the waves. The fridge was always full of beer, and no one stole it. Jack lived for himself, and that was enough. He knew Caitlin was out there somewhere, probably regretting her choice. Brad had probably found a new rich client. But they weren't his problem anymore. Jack was looking ahead, and for the first time, the future seemed bright. I know this story was meant to touch you, and if you listened to the end, it really did. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Trust me, I have plenty more that will make your heart ache. So comment what you think. Let's chat about it. I read everything. Your support means everything to me. Sincerely yours, Man Rebuilt. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.